Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the 360 Chartered Accountants Purple Surfer podcast. My name is Andy Steele and my special guest today is Gerard Toplass.
Good morning, Andy.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sorry the surroundings aren't quite as podcast studio-ish as you're perhaps used to, because you've done a few of these, haven't you?
I have done a few, yeah. I do one on music myself, actually. And look, it's fine. I mean, podcasts they're better when they're in an environment where it's natural for everybody.
Yeah. You say it's fine, but you wait till there's a bus parked outside that window, everything starts shaking, you can't hear anything,
Okay.
And then a lot of clients will arrive, usually about 15 minutes into the podcast, and start talking. Okay. But we'll
deal with that.
Cross that bridge.
We'll deal with it, yeah.
So, Gerard, it'd be really interesting to hear about your journey in life, how you've got to where you are today. Let's start off with your early life. So you were born in East Yorkshire?
Yeah, I was actually born into a hospital in Beverley.
Yeah.
So only because that's where my mum was told to have the birth. But I'm from the area. Yeah, I'm from East Yorkshire.
Yeah.
So I've never lived in the city centre. I've always lived in what would be called the Westfield villages. So
yeah.
I grew up predominantly in Willoughby.
Yeah.
And
I grew up in Willoughby.
Yeah, so it's I used to go to the Hoppool pub. I used to hang around the Holt Price Sports Centre and the fields that are behind it and what have you. So I grew up in the area. I went to a local school, went to Heimers College, and then after that I went to college in Hull.
Did you do your A-levels?
Yeah, I did at Heimers. It was a requirement that you had to do O-levels and A-levels.
Yeah. So what A-levels did you do?
I did maths, English and Latin. And I also did...
very tough subject.
Yeah, I also did... Well, I did... it's funny, really, because the school I went to, we did what's called classics. So I did Greek and Latin O-level. And I was fairly good at them. And although I wanted to do economics at A-level, our head teachers brought my parents in and said, no, it'd be better if Gerard did classics. That would be better for him academically. So
better for the school or better for you?
Well, he's claimed it'd be better for me. Now, interesting enough, having learned classics, it does actually change the way you actually learn things. So as a set of subjects, I felt it was very good and very interesting. And when I did Greek, funny enough, there was only 6 of us in the class, so it was quite a boutique lesson. Whereas Latin was quite mainstream really in Heimers back then. So look, I did those, and but I didn't go to university. There was a particular reason why I didn't go to university was because I did pretty well in my O-levels, but I was going to go to do politics at Warwick, but I found something which sort of interfered with my A-levels a little bit, which was going to a nightclub in Hull called Spiders, which sort of was the place.
Is still on the go?
Still on the go. I'm not so sure it's the same as it was when I was a kid. And I was going there from being 16, so it was. I sort of messed up one of my A-levels a bit, and my dad wasn't too keen on me doing a resit, so I went to college to do accountancy.
Right.
And that's what I did.
So which college was that?
It was called the Hull College of Higher Education, which then became Humberside Polytechnic.
Yeah.
And is now the University of Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
So, but it was what's called a HE college back then. So it was, we have FE colleges today. Hull College is one of them, but higher education colleges are slightly different.
Yeah.
So that's why I did something called Accountancy Foundation. I mean, you're an accountant, so back in the day you could do that. Didn't need a degree, and then you did your articles off the back of that. So that's what I did, and then I ended up working for a local firm called Dutton Moore Atkin Gilbert.
Yeah.
A fella called Eddie Gilbert was the actual guy I used to work for.
Still around today, the firm?
Yeah, and Eddie is as well, actually. I saw him recently, actually. And then KPMG came to set up in Hull back quite some time ago. And I got offered a job, and that was quite an interesting meeting when I went to see Eddie and to tell him that I was thinking of leaving. This was after my P1s, as they were called back then, the first part of your qualification. And I said, "Look, I'm gonna have to leave really." And he said, "Well, why do you want to leave? You know, you're getting the best training here." I said, "Well, to be honest, Eddie, you're paying me £3,500 a year, and KPMG have offered me 12 grand a year. So I feel like now might be the time to move." And he didn't speak to me for 6 years.
Yeah, funny you should say that, because I was on 3,300 a year when I first started as an apprentice accountant. So you went to KPMG.
Yeah, I went to KPMG, and
You've been dealing with sort of presumably bigger companies, national.
Yeah, a little bit, but that isn't exactly what happened for me actually. Because I'd done a lot of work at Dutton Moores on smaller businesses, and it was a bit more, you're in with the clients, a bit more entrepreneurial. It wasn't the big audit ticking and bashing that you see at these big firms. They actually had quite a few clients like that, so I got involved in those clients. And because I was quite outgoing, I got involved in the internal training scheme. So I ended up going to were these residential courses where they would bring in the new recruits, and it was inducting them into the KPMG way. So I got involved in that for about 18 months, and that was really good fun actually. It wasn't really accounting in that sense, but that was good. And then I did my P2s, which were the final exams, and then I ended up working in corporate finance, and I got involved in a number of deals. Some locally and some out of the area. I worked in Leeds and London a bit as well. But I did a fairly big deal for a local firm called the Saint Group, which was photocopiers.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah. So they actually they were bought by a company called Thankyü. It was a big national or international photocopying company, and they bought the company in Hull from Martin St Quintin, his brother actually. And so I got involved in that. I had a good time with that sort of deal. You know, we used to go out with the guys from Saints, met Martin, and he sort of saw I was a bit entrepreneurial and said, "If you ever have anything, you know, in the future, you want to, you know, business wise, sort of give me a ring." And I did about 10 years later.
So was you at KPMG for another 10
No,
years?
no, I wasn't. No, I worked for KPMG for about 3.5 years. And then I went to work for one of their clients, actually. And it was a car parts manufacturing firm in Scunthorpe.
How old are you now?
So I will have been, 91, 22, 23. I was actually...
Still quite young.
Well, I qualified quite early because I hadn't gone and done a degree. I passed all my exams first time because, you know, I didn't have spiders interfering with my education anymore.
Had you abandoned spiders at that
point? No. I'd actually met my wife, who I'm still married to today, at Spiders. She was a Hull University student at the time, doing a master's. So I met her.
So did your eyes meet over a green meanie?
No. I used to drink quadruple gin and tonics actually for £1, but she was sharing a flat with a girl she was at uni with, who I used to work with at Pete's. And we were in Spiders one day, and we just sort of met talking. I was going out with somebody, she was going out with somebody, but anyway, she came back to do her masters. I rang her up, this, that, the other, and off we went. Sort of 29 years later, 30 years next year, 2 kids, etc., etc. But no, I worked for. I left KPMG and went to work for this company called Devilit, and they got bought by a company called Limpac Mouldings, a fairly big company from Lincolnshire.
So was you still involved with sort of finance, accounting?
Yeah, I became the financial controller, and then eventually the FD. So I was quite young actually. I was 26, I think, when I became the FD of a 330 sort of person plant. You know, but majority of it would be sort of shop floor type workers, and they got bought, and then I moved. What used to happen then was the accountant used to be involved in IT. We didn't really have IT departments like we do today, and IT directors and CTOs and all this sort of clever stuff. So I ended up buying some computers from a local firm who was based on Hesel Road, called Chisholm's Computers.
Yeah.
Cut a long story short, Colin was a lot older than me. He wanted somebody to sort of help grow the business. So we did a deal, and I became a shareholder and a director of that business. And then 9 years later, after that, in 2004, I rang Martin St Quintal back up and said, do you want to buy this business? Because we'd gone from 2 men and a dog at 200 grand a year to 15 million, making quite a big profit. And we flogged the business back to Martin St Quintal, who was now had left Saint and had started a business called Azuri. And that was my first taste of private equity, because they were PE backed. So I sort of understood all of that.
So Chisholm's Computers, was that hardware?
It started out as hardware. Back in the day, I remember, when we were first started, we were selling computers at 2.5 grand at the time. This was back in the 90s, so when 2.5 grand was like 2.5 grand, but obviously, Dell and Compaq and HP were competing, and it was becoming more difficult to make sort of good margin on those. So we moved into services, and then we bought a couple of other business. We bought a cabling business, we bought a software business, and we got more into sort of services. And what was quite interesting, our turnover probably stayed the same, but our profitability shot up. So we moved into tech effectively, and that was really what set the scenes for the rest of, I guess, what my onward career really is, technology sort of biased businesses. Back at its ultimate aim, or ultimate sort of height, we were building nearly 2,000 computers a month on Gulton Street. But when we sold the business, we were producing no computers. We'd moved completely into software and services.
So at the start of Chisholm's was the internet a thing?
I'm not so sure it was exactly the start of the internet, but it was about. Well, Chisholm started in about '93. I got involved in '96 actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. So we had
sort of transitioned from nobody using the internet to everybody using it during that time.
Interesting enough, we were selling predominantly into the public sector, so we were selling to schools, and to, in a lower extent, the NHS and public sector. But schools was our big market, and there was quite a change at the time from what was called proprietary technology, from a company predominantly called RM, Research Machines, to open source, well, not so much open source, but open technologies like Windows, so Windows for Workgroups, Windows NT, more what you would call sort of industry standard, the sort of tools that kids would use when they got a job rather than specific for education. And that was what, there was ourselves and probably 4 or 5 companies in that space dotted around the country who benefited from that. We won some fairly big contracts, and we worked pretty hard and built quite a nice business really, and we sold it for a reasonable amount of money. Colin retired off, and I worked for that company for a bit. Didn't really fit into the, I was a bit of a, they bought 13 companies, and it was a bit like getting 13 pike and throwing them all into the same pond when you get 13 sort of fairly assertive entrepreneurs. So I lasted there about 18 months. Got the rest of my money out, and I was my first step at retirement for 6 months.
So this is early 2000s?
So this was actually 2005 is when we sold Chisholm's. And then I got involved in a couple of businesses. I got involved in a furniture business, local furniture business, which that was tough actually because it was the time of the recession. So we didn't really do a huge amount in that business. But at the same time,
so that was the big credit crunch.
Yeah, it was. It was a big credit crunch. It was quite tough for a lot of business, particularly product-based businesses.
Yeah.
So I got approached by somebody who had a bit of an idea around the software platform, and cut long story short, we chucked some money in and formed a business, and that became the bedrock of a very large business that is based headquartered in Hull now, called Pagabo.
Yeah.
Which I sort of built up with a team, and we went through. We've been through 2 rounds of private equity, and the second round, which was last March 24, with LDC. It's a fairly serious sort of deal now. It's a big company. I'm now not working there. I'm what's called a board advisor, but I don't work in there day to day. My brother now runs that. And it's going from strength to strength. It's a great business model. We invented a fantastic business model back in 2008-9, which means it's a bit like a snowball. You push it from the top of a hill, and it just gains momentum and gets bigger as it goes down. And it's really good at what it does. We focus on 11 out of 10 customer service. I've always talked about people and careers, not jobs. So You know, I don't offer people, I've never offered anybody a job. I offer them a career. It's whether they want to have the career or not. The culture was very, very strong. You know, it's the principles that, you know, we've tried to build that business on, which, you know, have meant there's low attrition, you know, good growth, stickiness, customers like what we do. We're always fair, and they're carrying that sort of journey on now, actually.
Okay.
Does that bring us up to?
So that brings us up to a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was March 24, actually.
Yeah.
It was when we, so just over 18 months, no, not even 18 months, 15, 16 months ago. So that's when I took official retirement, because I was in a position where I could. But being 55 at the time and having been married 28 years by then, I felt if I wanted to be married another few years, I better get something to do. Because, you know, I was really getting under my wife's feet a bit at home, and there's so many times you can go and play golf, go on holiday, and do whatever you want to do, you know. So it brought me into a new area, and I wanted to do something technology. And I do predominantly two things now. I invest in technology businesses. So I now invest in private equity funds and businesses. I've just made an investment recently, so I've got 8 investments now. So I invest in a whole host of businesses which are predominantly tech focused or biased. And I've taken on the chair of a business called Phase, which is a circadian sleep rhythm map, which is being developed by a Formula One sports science coach, and that's quite an interesting idea. So, you know, myself and some other angels, I'm part of something called the Leeds Angels Network. I'm more connected to outside of the city when it comes to investment. I find there's a bigger opportunity there. It's a bit more techy, and there's a bit more going on. Just that's the way it is. So, and I'm chairing that business, so that's quite an interesting one. And then my passion is a business I've started called Thankyü, which, just to summarise it, is I've always been somebody who gives a tip to somebody who works in the hospitality space. You know,
as in a cash tip.
A cash tip, yeah.
I would do it differently.
No, I might do that as well, actually. But the predominantly, yeah, it'd be sort of cash. So, you know, you buy your meal, you get your round of drinks. Here's a couple of quid, tenner for you and the team. But the world changed. You know, a lot of it was around COVID, but cash was disappearing. People use technology all the time now. Young people's behaviours changed, and at the same time, young people who work in these environments, it's usually a second job, a job next to maybe study, or it's an early career. It's usually low paid, and they will face very high cost of living increases because of, you know, the way the world is and was and still is. So, you know, they were losing disproportionately an element of their income which they relied on. So I thought there must be a better way of doing this. The legislation changed last October, and the government had sort of recognised there was a problem in this space. There's a few players in the space, but in my opinion, it's not optimised at all. They do it in I would say, a non-optimal fashion. So we've developed an app which, you know, I can give you a tip directly, peer-to-peer. You get the money, you mitigate your HMRC tax and NIC all compliantly. You get the money quickly. You get access to other benefits. It's a really sort of, you know, it's dedicated to you as a service worker. And if you work in a pooling environment, you work for a bar, you can take a share of the pool tips. So it's not just peer-to-peer. It works in that. And that has extended now really into, it's really, the mission I'm now on, I suppose, is I want to make all service workers be seen as key workers. Started out as a tipping tool, but it's now moving into a donation and casual income tool and support for organisations, community groups, venues, particularly grassroots music, which I'll touch on in a second, I guess. We've got some clever stuff around disruptive instant feedback coming, which is really quite interesting, and we've got something called Thankyü Club. But it go back to the mission. You know, the story is a friend of mine works for the NHS, and he's always going on about he's got a blue light card. Fantastic blue light card. I get save this, I get that. I said, not being funny, Will, but you're on a big salary and you just move stuff around for the NHS. You're not exactly saving lives. Let's put it into perspective. Whereas service workers, the young person who sorts your coffee, your tea, your sandwich, putting a smile on your face, helping you get on with your day, they're getting treated pretty badly. So I want to create an ecosystem which is the equivalent of a blue light card, but for the service sector, because there's 12 million of those in the UK. So that's where we're going, and we've got some clever stuff coming on feedback. And if you keep an eye on our website and whatever, you'll sort of see that.
So what's the website address?
Thankyü.com, THANKYU.com. It's called Thankyü because originally, when I was just focused on tipping, I was in Portugal with my wife, and over a sagres and a coffee, I said, look, I need a name for this tipping solution. So we came up with a working title, Tippity Tip. So I actually own a URL, Tippity Tip. But we didn't feel that had as much sort of longevity. And
quite hard to say when you've had a few.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and also I wanted it. There's quite a few solutions with the word tip in the name, and we aren't a tipping solution primarily. Yes, we've got core functions around that, but we're actually going to be moving into these other spaces which they don't do, and I don't think they'll be able to accommodate at all well or easily. So, thank you, dead easy. Every time anybody says thank you, you're saying my brand. Spelled slightly differently, but it's a fairly well used and understood word. So, and it's about thanking you. So, it's about frontline service workers, celebration, recognition, and reward. So it's a much bigger umbrella piece.
Right. So is the technology finished? Is it ready to go yet?
Yeah, we did a soft launch in April and May. That informed us of a couple of things we had to advise, and which we've sort of over summer we're finishing that off with a harder launch in September. Because we deal with money, that does require quite a bit of governance. So, people will be familiar with the terminologies KYC. They might not know what it means, but when you open a bank account and you take a photograph and your ID and your passport and your face check and all that sort of stuff, you're doing a KYC check. I mean, you'll know what that is. So we've implemented some what they call rails around that. We work with a company called Viva, who do the acquiring in the cloud, and we work with MasterCard and Visa and other sort of credit cards. So we've put all of that in. So we've now got probably the first solution which can do what we've done peer-to-peer. And our proposition is quite funky, really. If you're a bar and a cafe, we don't charge for the portal. We actually we deliver it via the individuals in a very clever, compliant way. Which is we've had to create this or build this real strong governance structure. So that'll be finished. I mean, technology works in sprints. It's called every 2 weekly sort of work patterns. So yeah, we've done a really good job. We've got a great team, got a young team. I've got a guy who we brought in from Nigeria, Hamed. We're sponsoring his visa. Back to my careers, not jobs. We're looking after people. So we're sponsoring his visa, and we've got Olivia, who is the head of product. We've got Brady, and we've just offered a job to somebody as our first sort of field sales partnership sort of thing. So yeah, it's quite exciting time, really.
Wow. So launching in September, hopefully. So presumably that will involve.
It's available now. You can download the app now.
Yeah.
But we're not. We haven't. We did a bit of a push in May. And then we had some changes we had to make, so we sort of paused that, and we're going back again to. But you can, as an individual, you can download it today and enter the free draw, and you might win 50 quid each week.
Right.
So that's quite cool.
So the field salesperson will presumably be looking for hospitality businesses to implement.
Correct. Yeah. So we're targeting. We're going to be targeting multi-site operations. I mean. If you think, just as to why, I mean, the benefit to, you've got a lot of small, successful businesses, and some of them will be in hospitality, Andy. So, with the increase in national insurance, that's 15%. So let's say let's say you, as a small bar or cafe, you've got £20,000 worth of tips going through the till. That's costing you £3,000 in national insurance. Okay. Before the legislation came in, you would have probably taken that £3,000 off and distributed the 17 grand to the staff through your payroll. That is now illegal. If you took that £3,000 off the staff, you could be fined now. So you have to give them the 20 grand. So having to process 20 grand through the till costs the business £3,000. Our system doesn't. There's a platform which saves the national insurance. It also means the acquiring doesn't go through your till, so you save money on your Dojo card or whatever. So it's, for a business, it actually saves money as well as being really good for the staff.
Less admin as well?
Yeah, less admin. The admin's done on the app, actually. There is a portal, so because obviously if you're in a hospitality setting and you've got 10 staff, 20 staff, because obviously usually they work as a team, so it's not just the front of house, it's the people in the kitchen or doing the cleaning or whatever. So one of the staff will administer the portal, which means they can distribute the £1,000 a month tips or whatever they've got, either democratically or by hours or by effort or by some sort of policy driven sort of distribution process. And then the technology does it all automatically. But businesses save money, save admin, stay compliant, and it's a recruitment and retention tool for people. Because if I was getting a job and the company didn't have a very good tipping policy, I might go and work for the bar next door where they've got one.
I suppose it also eliminates the doubt about where the tip's going.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point, actually, because if you put your, we all see it because it still happens today. You get a bill and there's like £100 bill, and then there's 5%, 10%, 20% on that. So you pay, there is a move now. People are actually asking where the money's going. Very often the staff don't know. And then you press 0. And in some settings, the person giving you the EPOS device usually presses 0 beforehand because they're embarrassed about it being added on. In this scenario, you pay £100. The messaging is clear where the money is going on the tip, so you can give a voluntary tip, and it might be more. If you've had a super service, you might give 25% or whatever. You might choose whatever number you want to do. So it's now very clear because all the staff know that the money is being given to the staff for the service. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're turning service people into sales people for service. So it's a bit like if you sell widgets in a sales environment and your target is 100 widgets and you get paid whatever you get paid for doing that. If you sell 200 widgets, you might get a bigger commission. In service, if you sell really good service, they might tip more, so you can get more. It's improving the life of the individuals, but also for the customer, because the customer benefits directly and indirectly from the improvement in service.
Yeah. And you said it's also being rolled out to charities, community groups.
So the products are, for individuals, it's called Thankyü Now, Freedom and Boost. Now is the free down-to-load app, and that's on a pay-as-you-go with some core club offers. Freedom is an increase of the club offers, which you'll see that in August. That's quite funky what we're doing in that. Boost is an all-you-can-eat package, so it's not pay-as-you-go anymore. So if you're earning more than £20 a week on average in tips, you're better off on the Boost because it reduces your sort of fees. Then we've got Thrive, which is for organisations. So imagine, so I'll give you two use cases. A community group, sports, whether it be dance group, sports, rugby, cricket, whatever, wheelchair football. They will often struggle and a challenge with raising money. So you can use Thrive. You onboard as an organisation, and it's exactly the same technology for receiving the tips, but now the money gets paid into the bank account for the community group. So, and if you were to go against other systems, we're about a quarter of the price of the other systems. So there are systems out there, but they'll be well known. But we're a much more sort of optimised for cost. And we've got some other sort of functions and features which are included that they don't have. Music venues, specifically for those, One of my hobbies, one of my interests is I go to a lot of music gigs. So I do a podcast with a pal of mine. It's on Spotify. Play One We Know. The company's called Velvet Sky Conversations. We're 41 podcasts in as we sit here today. It's about indie, new wave, punk music, my generation, and we talk about the industry, particular bands. We talk about a whole host of things. As a result of that, we've become close to a lot of music venues. One's in Hull, Polar Bear, Welly, Adelphi, Humber Street Social. There's quite a lot of sort of local sort of venues, and they're really struggling because cost of living has hit them. They haven't got as many patrons coming through the door. When I was a kid, when you were a kid, when we'd go out to a gig, I'd have 6 or 7 pints. Now you go to a gig and the young Gen Z, they'll spend all night sitting around a bottle of lemonade. So the income is not really coming through the door. Bands aren't touring as much. They don't get as much money from direct digital streaming platforms. So music venues are really struggling. So it's called grassroots economy. So you can use Thrive for that. And that's going to be a particular push for us because we're ticking a box that I'm interested in.
Yeah. Is it true there's not as many bands either? Because it's a much harder industry to be successful in.
No, I think there's lots of bands, but in fact, I mean, okay. See, I go to a lot of new music. Now, obviously, when this summer we've got Oasis and Coldplay, the 2 big sort of tours, and we've just had Taylor Swift and another band. So the sort of larger artists, the top 200 or 300 artists, they get all the airplay they get in terms of social and what have you. But new music, I mean, I go to a lot of new music, and there's just as much new music now as there was years and years ago. Well, you've got some savvy operators now who are using YouTube and Insta and TikTok to actually publicise their content. But the way most of us, particularly older people, would recognise music is via a platform like Apple Music or Spotify. And they keep changing the rules. So, it used to be you'd get a very small amount of money off your stream. But now it's only streams and followers above a certain level. There's a threshold. So, to gain any sort of money on Spotify is really quite difficult. But it isn't putting people off. What it's probably happening is people are not coming through as often, and to see the sort of success that you maybe saw in the 80s and the 90s, that's more difficult now. But it's still happening. It is still happening. There's lots. I mean, I go to, if you go to Adelphi, for example, they've got some pretty obscure new music on pretty much every night. Right. And that's just in Hull. You go to Manchester, Leeds and London, it's amplified.
Yeah. I had my 18th birthday party in Adelphi.
Right, that'll be when we had the pool table in the front then?
Yeah, it was basically the cheapest,
put that back now.
Cheapest option. The great night.
Yeah, well, I that opened in '83, I think, and I've been 14. I think I started going in '85 actually, '86.